104.5 The Team, your home for the World Series right here in the Cap region. We're joined by ESPN's baseball insider himself, Buster Olney. So, Buster, I just got done reading your article on Josh Tomlin. What a great guy.
He's a terrific guy. And, he, of course, starts Game 3 for the Indians tonight. And this is a really special day for him because his father gets to watch him pitch. In early August, his dad fell ill while he was at work, and it's a very rare illness, and it wound up paralyzing his father from the chest down. And so there was a question for a while about whether his father would survive, and he did. He was recently let out of the hospital. During the postseason, I talked to Josh about his dad, and after Game 1 of the World Series, when I asked Josh about it, he just got the biggest grin. And Josh Tomlin reminds me a lot of George Bailey, and It's a Wonderful Life. He lights up a room. He's the favorite teammate of guys on the Indians. They always talk about how positive he is. If he was your next-door neighbor, he'd be the first guy to, jump into his pickup truck and help pull you out of the mud. That's just the type of guy he is. And he was telling me about, hey, my dad's going to get to fly up here to watch the World Series, and he looked at me, and he's so earnest, and he said, do you know if there's some place there at Wrigley where they can put people in wheelchairs? And I said, Josh, there definitely is a place for people in wheelchairs, but on top of that, you can bet that the Cubs will do everything they can to help you. So tonight, not only is he pitching for the Indians as they try to take a 2-1 lead in the series, but he's also getting to pitch in front of his dad, and it's going to be a really cool thing for him no matter what happens.
It's kind of one of those things, Buster, where it doesn't matter who you're rooting for in the series, you're rooting for the Indians tonight.
Well, and I would bet that once we get past the World Series, again, no matter what happens, that there'll be Cubs players who are trying to beat Josh Tomlin tonight who are going to say that they thought it was really cool that he had that kind of moment. I mean, he's absolutely a guy you root for. Chris Antonetti, their team president, was on my podcast today, and he talked about how revered he is in their clubhouse.
Kyle Schwarber's start to the World Series, can you compare it to anything you've seen in past World Series in your career?
No, not even close. He didn't have a hit in 370 days in the big leagues, and he goes into Game 1 of the World Series against one of the nastiest two-seam fastballs we've ever seen from Corey Kluber, and right away you could see he was having great at-bats. I talked to a Cubs official the morning of Game 1, and what I was told was, look, we don't really have any idea what he's going to bring to the table. It's a total mystery. He might be terrible. Well, 2 plate appearances into that game, after a 6-pitch strikeouts in which he was really competitive and then he hits a ringing double, you understood, he was one of the Cubs' best hitters, which is why it's so unfortunate for them that he's not going to be able to play in the field. But you can understand it. I mean, guys, after Game 2 of the World Series, he's in the interview room telling us he hasn't even shagged a fly ball since he was injured in that game earlier this year. And doctors were obviously being very careful with that blown-out knee, and they do not want re-injury. And so now Joe Madden has a great weapon sitting on his bench.
Buster Olney with us right now on 104.5 The Team talking World Series. So with Kyle Schwarber not being able to play the field, all over the place, I've been hearing the debate of why you should or should not have the DH. You know me, I'm an American League guy. I like offense, so I love it. But Buster, should we have a DH? Is it unfair that the two leagues play so differently?
It's a little bit like asking, should we have a Republican Party and a Democratic Party, okay? I mean, that's how great this split is. You get the owners of the National League. A lot of them absolutely love those rules. I love those rules. I'm sorry, you're dead wrong in liking the American League rules. You're out of your mind, okay? But that's not going to change, and the union is not going to go back on having the DH in the sport. And at the same time, it doesn't seem like that the National League owners are prepared any time to go to a point where they're using the DH. So you have split rules, and it's been going on for 43 years now, and that's just the way it's going to be going forward.
Listen, you should be amazed I even like it, considering if it's not for the DH, there's no such thing as David Ortiz.
That's true, but on the other hand, you guys had, as a Yankee fan, your team's always had a lot of great DHs too, so I don't want to hear it.
Well, Buster, speaking about people who might be out of their mind, I've become one of these people that believe if the Chicago Cubs win the World Series, it's actually bad for baseball. What are your thoughts on that?
I had a conversation the other day with a person in baseball, and I was saying to them, I think we've had this conversation before, how as a sports writer, you're always trying to identify the most interesting thing that could happen. And I think I told you guys the story of the 98 Yankees and my conversation with Paul O'Neill, because he looked at me one day late that season, and he said, Buster, you root for us, right? And I said, Paul, I got to tell you, right now, there's no question about it. I am rooting for you guys to go on and win the World Series because that's the most interesting story, because you'd validate this great regular season. And he looked at me and nodded and said, that's what I thought. And I said, you know what else would be really interesting is if next year you guys lost every game. Okay, that's the sort of the twisted way that writers think. And so the other day I was having this conversation with a baseball executive, and I said the most interesting results, without a doubt, in this World Series would be if the Indians beat the Cubs. And then the pursuit, the chase for this Cubs team continues into next year, carries over into next year. They got the pennant this year, and they certainly are going to keep this great group of players together for years to come. And I would agree with you. The most interesting storyline would be that the Cubs were to lose in this postseason. That's not saying I'm rooting for it. I'm just agreeing with you. That is the most interesting storyline.
Buster, Goss just dropped the mic and walked away.
I just left the studio. Thank you, Buster. Made my day.
Yep.
But
you're dead right.
But wow, Buster, you are fired up today, and I love it. Buster Olney with us, 104.5 The Team. I wish you were agreeing with me more, but I'll take it. Can you imagine the tears? Like I'm looking at this right now in Wrigleyville. Like outside of Wrigley is this most amazing feeling, this vibe, and you're going to be there, and it's only going to get crazier. I don't want to see tears in Wrigleyville.
Look, how many years have we heard about the Cubs fans being lovable, right? That they go and support their team, win or lose. And when they won Game 6 of the National League Championship Series last weekend against the Dodgers, I was talking with a producer who was there, and he told me about how in the 8th inning, he was trying to get back into the center of the city, trying to beat the crush from Wrigley Field into the city. It was the 8th inning, and he gets on the train, and the trains were filled coming out to Wrigley Field. And the train going back to the city was completely empty. Last weekend was so big for that franchise. In a sense, they broke that curse, not being in the World Series since 1945, and they have such a great team, and they have such a great future. I think they would be upset if they lost the World Series. I don't think they would be crushed.
Indians overall using Corey Kluber on short rest. How do you see him performing going forward for the rest of the series?
Well, and I thought it was the exact right decision because Corey Kluber really, for an ace, hasn't really pitched a lot. In the 30 days leading up to his Game 1 start in the World Series, he'd thrown only 353 pitches, okay? 353 pitches in 30 days because they wrapped up their division quickly, so they eased him back. Then they were very efficient in the first 2 rounds of the postseason, playing a total of 8 games. And this allows them to be reliant on Corey Kluber, who was so great in Game 1. And Terry Francona limited him to 88 pitches, and he's now well set up to throw the rest of the series. And think about this number, guys. After Game 1 of the World Series, Corey Kluber, Andrew Miller, and Cody Allen, those 3 pitchers were responsible for 58.3% of the innings thrown in this postseason by Cleveland, okay? Terry Francona had used 1 starter and 2 relievers for 58% of the innings. You can bet he'll be going for the jugular in the same way every time Corey Kluber pitches.
Buster Olney with us right here on 104.5 The Team, your home for New York Yankees baseball, where one of those guys that you just mentioned came from. I mean, it's hard as a Yankee fan. I'm rooting for Andrew Miller because, he was traded. It's not like he had some absurd demand and left. But at the same time, I'm more and more I'm looking at this trade and going, why did we let him go?
Well, I can tell you this. Brian Cashman, the Yankees general manager, he's been on record saying this. He is thrilled for the Indians. He's thrilled for Andrew Miller that they're having this success. He's talked about wanting them to be able to say that they got return on that trade they made because they did pay a very high price. Now, at the time they made that trade, this is a small market team giving up a boatload of prospects for Miller. Part of the thought process was within the organization was, well, you know what, if it doesn't go right the rest of the way, if we don't make it to the playoffs, we can always put Andrew Miller out on the trade market at some point and get some return back. And I wrote in my column at that time that if, in fact, at some point they traded Miller, they could probably expect 80 cents on the dollar in value. Well, the other day, an Indians official walked up to me and reminded me of that number. He said, based on what he's doing this offseason, we might get 150 cents on the dollar. And, of course, if the Indians are out of the running next year, if they get injuries or for whatever reason they're not in contention, they put Andrew Miller out on the trade market based on what he's done this offseason or postseason. Are you kidding me?
Oh, Buster Olney with us. So, Buster, we touched on the fact that Gaz hates all the old people in Chicago that want to see the Cubs finally win.
That's not what it said.
He also he throws an absolute fit anytime I bring up the Arizona Fall League, Buster.
It's practice of practice. We don't need to talk about it, right?
I'm guessing you're referring to Tim Tebow?
Well, Tim Tebow, Gleyber Torres, Greg Bird, James Caprillion, Dylan Tate. There's a lot going on for Yankee fans right now, and since we're not playing in the World Series, the Arizona Fall League feels like the next best thing to me.
Well, and I'll throw you this bone, Levack, since I basically disagree with everything you said in this interview. Where did Kyle Schwarber come from 3 days of practice before he thrived in the World Series?
The Arizona Fall League.
Yeah, you can take that shit and run with it.
He's Buster Early. Buster, are you? What's the game plan for you for today?
Going out, and we've got a pregame show today, and I'm going to be part of that, doing interviews around the batting cage before the game, and then doing stuff after the game, but mostly just enjoying the atmosphere there at Wrigley. It'll be amazing. Buster
Olney, he is the man when it comes to baseball. Makes time for us. If you're not an insider, you're missing so much great content. Buster, what do we only have one more talk for this season left, right? Like next week we wrap it up, and that's it for a while.
But you'll still be spending your winter in New York Yankees pajamas, right?
I'm wearing them right now to work.
There you go.
Buster, have a great time, man. We'll talk to you next week, and just really enjoy Wrigleyville. You deserve it, my friend.
Thanks, guys.